Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robert Schmid, also known as Mr. IoT. I am the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte with a deep passion for all things digital. This week on Coffee with Miss Connected and Mr. IoT, first of all, I'm missing Kelsey. She is taking a well-deserved day off. And I am talking with Angelo, and I'm going to say this wrong, but I'll try anyhow, Stracquatanio. And we're going to talk about augmented reality. Angelo, am I finding you at Burning Man? This looks like you have Burning Man goggles on.
Oh, sorry. I was checking my email on augmented reality. Sorry about that. That was actually the new Magic Leap headset, which is actually, we believe it's really cool device. It's got some bad rap in the press, but it's actually, in our opinion, kind of the state of the art right now. And really kind of an exciting device for where we believe this is all going. But no Burning Man right now, at least. I still need my coffee if I was going to do that.
Well, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. You're working in a space where, I said this when we talked before, I have a bit of a soft spot. I started wearing Google Glass very, very early on. And I find to this day, actually, the form factor of Google Glass is really cool and light, and it had problems, but there was something about it. Did you ever use Google Glass? Is this where you started?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the very first device that we used when we were getting started was a Google Glass device. I actually have one to show you guys, both the new and the old. So this is my very first Google Glass that started the company. This was actually a very good investment at the time. My wife thought I was crazy, that I was spending $1,500 on a device, but it's paid off. And now this is the new generation of the device, the Google Glass 2.0 in Enterprise Edition. So really nice device, lightweight, really just a pleasant form factor. And it really kick-started this whole wave of augmented reality applications, devices, you name it. That really was the nice germination of this entire industry. So it's really cool that after all these years, it still does kind of hold its own next to other devices. And we're really happy that Google in those early days took a risk on going down this path of this thing called AR, which has then led to a whole new swath of things.
So augmented reality, glasses, you and I chatted about the Virtual Factory by Deloitte. You can download anywhere. It's the Duck Factory. You played with it, so that was our take on it. But you have and it's actually a replica of what we actually do at a factory. But what you do, how did that start? Tell us what your product does a little bit, and not sort of in a salesy kind of way, but sort of really, I'd be curious, how did you come up with it? What is it about? And where did you take it from when Google first came out to today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really interesting. So back in 2014, which is going back to the very first release of the Google Glass, my co-founder and I were having a conversation, and she comes from pharma. Just as an FYI, we do augmented reality for pharma and biotech, but she comes from the industry, and we were having a conversation one evening, and she was talking about all the things that were going wrong in her facility. Everything from a gentleman picking up the wrong paper binder to somebody who walked up to a bioreactor that he thought was off, and he dumped a $2 million batch of biologics on the floor because he just was tired and wasn't paying attention. And I couldn't believe at the time that this was still happening in what was, my opinion, the most sophisticated biomanufacturing facility on the planet. And to me, it was crazy that this industry that is this capable, this smart, this advanced, was still using paper to do most of their process. So as soon as Google Glass came out, a kind of light bulb went off in my mind, and I literally grabbed this very first device, built a simple application at the time. Looking back, I thought it was complicated, but it's nowhere near what we are now. But we took a risk on it, and we went to a trade show for big biologics pharma manufacturing, and we won back in 2015 Best New Pharma Manufacturing Product worldwide against GE and Thermo Fisher and these big guys. And so it definitely told me that we're not crazy. We're on to something here. But what's so fascinating is that it took a while for the devices to catch up to the vision that we had for the company. As capable of as Google Glass was, the form factor at the time and some of the Wi-Fi capabilities and CPU, just weren't there yet. So we had to kind of wait a few years for the hardware to catch up to the vision that we had for the technology. And then Pokemon Go came out, which, thank you, Pokemon Go, for all of a sudden kind of getting to a point where, the industry had an understanding of what augmented reality was, albeit, their understanding was a Pikachu on a table, but hey, we'll take it. And that application was enough where all of a sudden people started looking really seriously at the technology, from, global heads of R&D to heads of manufacturing, where all of a sudden now we built a platform so that the scientist working in the lab or the operator or engineer working in manufacturing, we've built a solution to be their all-day workflow platform, so that as they're following their process, we can show them everything that they need to do. If they need to see a technique on how to do something, we can demonstrate that with photo, video, and 3D content. And then we've built this whole suite of computer vision and AI capabilities to be able to capture data in real time as they're going through, to provide that real-time feedback to the user. So the goal is, to stop that guy from walking up to that bioreactor in my early origin story, so that he doesn't make the mistake. And then at the same time, give him or her the capability to truly augment what they're working on, not necessarily just augmenting their field of view. Our big vision is that augmented reality is not just about displaying cool stuff. Our vision for AR is that it is enabling this augmentation of the human, so that the human and the machine working together can develop an output that is substantially better, which in our case is substantially better for patients around the world. Because ultimately that's what the mission of our customers is to make drug product and get it out to patients. And we're kind of right in the center of all that. So it's cool that, going back to 2014 with that Google Glass device, how the whole industry has evolved over those years, and we've evolved with it.
Can you do today what your vision is on the devices that exist, or are the devices still the limiting factor to drive your vision?
So we've come up with a clever idea to execute on our vision without necessarily being limited by today's hardware. So what we do now is we use all different types of form factors, from a tablet to a mobile device to a headset like the RealWear HMT, which is a really nice glanceable device. So when I'm working with my two hands, I just quickly glance at the screen at the corner of my eye. I can still use the camera for all the computer vision capabilities. And then when I need rich 3D content, we use a device like Magic Leap or HoloLens. And so what we found is that the combination of the form factors is what is most powerful. Use the device for what it's good at right now, and then that way you're able to execute on the dream that we've had. And so our software stitches all together, of course, but we use the hardware for what they're good at today. Like I'm going to use Magic Leap, for example. It got a little bit of a bad rap in the press in the last month, let's call it. We still believe it's a good device if you use it in the right use cases. So controlled environments, smaller 3D models, smaller interaction, and it provides a better level of capability today, instead of going after that big dream of tomorrow where your entire environment is augmented. So it's just being clever about how you use the hardware is really what we found to be most powerful.
Fascinating. So it's really this combination of devices rather than one device. By the way, if you're just joining us now, I'm Robert Schmid, the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte, and you're watching Coffee with Miss Connected and Mr. IoT. And today, my guest is Angelo Stracquatanio, and we're talking about his company Apprentice, which makes, you don't even call it augmented reality, you call it augmented abilities, right? Did I read that right?
You're exactly right, because augmented reality, I believe, will only take us so far to achieve our real vision of empowering human beings in the next wave of research and manufacturing. I think the challenges of tomorrow will really put a lot of pressure on what humans are capable of being unaided. And we believe that augmented reality kind of provides the mechanism to begin to move towards a world where humans are truly augmented as they're working in these environments. So we don't believe in a dystopian future where humans do not work any longer in industrial settings or in manufacturing. That's not our belief. We just believe their roles will change. And it won't be, they're doing the same thing over and over again. We believe it's going to be dynamic, where they're working in real time in conjunction with a technology like this to get to an output that neither the human nor machine alone could have done. So that's why we believe we're more augmenting the human than necessarily augmenting reality.
It's interesting. I think what that talks about is this idea, and I talk about this often with IoT. It's one thing to have a sensor and get information. That's sort of the reality version of what you talk about, right? This is the reality. This is the data. That's what I see. But the ability is to actually interact with it, act on it, and really do something with it. So it's sort of like taking it from seeing something to acting on something. Is that sort of like how you see it too?
Absolutely. So we obviously have the cool capabilities to view real-time data from pieces of equipment. But what we found in actually deploying AR is that the humans want more. They don't want to just see the data. They want it to bring it to them to the point where they can make a decision with it, and then have the technology aid them in making sure it's the right decision. So it's the combination of not just sensing it and viewing it, but putting it into a form factor that makes sense for them to make a decision on it. And getting them to transition from just viewing to actually making decisions is really critical part of the success of augmented reality.
Got it. So I have a question for you about this. And I noticed this when I had Google Glass. I loved it. I got a special version. I had like lenses put in and blah, blah, blah. So I would walk around with it all day.
Yeah.
But I think there is a step of acceptance that's required on the user to really actually let it in. And what I mean by that is not let it in physically, but let it help you, let it be a part of you, let it guide you. Do you find that being a problem? How do you make that easy for people that they actually really interact with it on a regular basis?
Yeah, so what's really fascinating is that there's a lot of different anxieties, let's call it, using this type of technology. One of them, which I'm not kidding, is even what it'll do to your hair. Will it kind of crunch down on your hair? Will it make you look funny? And there's a lot of these different things that when you're using something that's on your face, I mean, literally it's a computer on your face. There's a lot of different things that people need to get comfortable with. And so coming back to my earlier comment about the different form factors, what we've been successful with is kind of building the crescendo up to a more sophisticated device, because people ultimately need to be comfortable with this new form factor. And so we do different clever things, everything from different like games and stuff to get them more comfortable with the understanding of how to use the devices. And then we've seen that over time, they begin to adopt the devices a little bit faster as they've gotten past this comfort level. So, for folks that don't care about messing up their hair, it's a lot faster adoption, I can say. But for others, we work really hand in hand with our customers. We're working with really super sharp scientists, and they have a willingness and a desire to improve their core business. And then from there, it's just a matter of working together to collaborate on how can this device be seamlessly integrated with their day-to-day. And a lot of it is just comfort levels around having a screen in front of your face for the very first time. Right now we have it where it's at like an arm's length, but when it's literally on your face, it's a different type of setup. And so it's a lot of collaboration with the customer.
So it's fascinating how sometimes there is synchronicity in events. When I flew yesterday on the flight, I was watching a documentary by Katie Couric about, she says she has an iPhone addiction. And in a way, I feel like we are fostering even a stronger addiction to a device in our face, What do you think about sort of like the human impact of this? If I have this, how do you make it something that actually doesn't? There was a whole, in the documentary. It's interesting. They showed how our frontal cortex and how our blood pressure goes up when certain things happen, and so it was fascinating. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so this gets into a lot of the usability and UI and UX for this new medium, right? And I think if you see some of these crazy futuristic YouTube videos, you're walking down the street in Times Square and you see 10,000 images along the street. That will give me, I mean, that will raise my own blood pressure. This is what I do for a living. Our belief on AR is that it should be there when you need it, and otherwise there should not be a thing floating in front of your face. And so, for example, the RealWear HMT is a really nice device because it's meant to be glanceable. So I look at it when I need it, and otherwise this screen should not be obstructing my field of view, because ultimately what matters is the job. I need to do something. This is what my output is, and this is what I need to do to survive my day. This technology should not get in the way and get to a stage in which it's constantly flickering in front of your face, because all that's going to do, at least in the industrial setting, it's going to be a safety hazard. It's going to slow you down. And so instead, it's our belief from a usability standpoint that we only provide content when it's needed, and otherwise we actually don't want to be in front of your face, and instead have it be either see-through in the case of Magic Leap, where there's nothing that you're looking at, or in the case of, say, like a RealWear device where it's there and then it goes away and you only consume it when you need it. Because otherwise, 100% agree. And it's a world that, if we're building a future, we don't want to live in that future. And so we want to build one that we would like to live in ourselves.
I got it. Let me just get out of the esoteric world a little bit and come back to real actual use cases that you have implemented with your clients. And I know the client names are sensitive, so I'm not going to ask you about that. But what are the real use cases? How many people are using it today? And what do you see the actual benefits to be? I get the $2 million not lost saving, but on a day-to-day basis, what do you see?
Yeah, so it's really fascinating. We've gotten to a point now where we have over 50 worldwide deployments all around the planet, from Singapore to South Korea to China to Brazil and multiple countries in South America, to multiple folks in Europe, from the UK to Belgium to Ireland, Germany, and all around, and of course through the US. And what we found is there's a pretty consistent thread when it comes to successful use cases. The first of which is a part of our product that's just a component of it, but not the larger system. The larger system is really what we've gotten into in the day-to-day. But the easiest way to get started with this technology is to use it as a telepresence tool. So being able to, I'm working on a piece of equipment, the subject matter expert isn't there. This is kind of like a classic use case for augmented reality. And it's one of which, what we did with it, we brought it into the regulatory sphere. So even for that type of product, it's fully regulatory compliant with 21 CFR Part 11. And so being able to provide that capability in a global setting, because most of our customers have anywhere from 50 to 140 global locations around the planet, and collaborating and troubleshooting on that scale is hard. So in our case, what they do is they put the device on, and a subject matter expert somewhere else in the world can provide that troubleshooting, collaboration, and support. And so it's a really easy way for companies to get started very, very quickly. Where we spend a majority of our time, though, is on one of two things: either working with the scientists in the lab as they're going through an experiment and documenting, displaying what they need to work on, and showing them how to do it, and providing a way where we can connect to their electronic lab notebook so that they're going through their experiment completely hands-free and able to access data, capture it, document it, provide that entire capability, is really nice, because even if we're not reducing errors per se, we're increasing the speed at which people can transcribe data, because you wouldn't imagine how much stuff is written down in a sophisticated kind of research facility. And then in manufacturing, it's all about the batch. We are in support of the batch, and making sure that the batch record is all done through our platform, so that as they're going through the batch making process for a drug, whether it's something as simple as a pill that's being used in small molecule development. So I take some chemicals, I smash it together, I get a pill, or in biologics where we're working literally with the folks that have developed the next cutting edge cancer therapeutic in biologics. We're providing a system where they can go through their entire batch in augmented reality. And so those two use cases we found to be incredibly powerful, because not only is it easier to go through something and follow the process, but capturing the data and providing the real-time feedback is massive. At least in our world. You know, I can't speak to, say, Elon Musk's Tesla facility, but I can speak to biologics. And at least in our world, those are the kind of powerful use cases that we see.
It's fascinating, right? I work much more in the not so clean industrial space today. And it'd be very interesting for me to see if we'd merge the efficiencies that we talk about on the machine with the batch tracking that you do. I think there's some really interesting overlap. Angelo, I want to shift gears one more time. We're coming sort of to the end of the show. And one of the things that fascinated me about you when I looked at your background was you took quite a leap of faith, I want to say here, when you became the CEO and co-founder. You were an engineer, you were a developer, and then you got Google Glass, and it seems like Google Glass really showed you an opportunity for you. Tell me a little bit about that journey from being a developer to becoming a startup, particularly a founder and a CEO of a startup in a space that's been very, very early. And how was the road? How was the switch? Just give us a little bit perspective, more on a personal level. I'd love to hear about that to close it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So this journey has been interesting because, you know, my background, I've been building enterprise mobile applications for about the last decade. So going back to the very first iPhone and Android, I've been always building enterprise apps, always internal. So I never got to send it out to the App Store and have somebody download, you know, an Angry Birds game of mine or anything like that. That was never my thing. It was always in the enterprise. And I built a really comfortable life because I was building really custom, really high-end applications for investment banks, healthcare institutions, pharma, entertainment, publishing, all around the globe. And it got to the point, though, where I saw this opportunity and there was something inside of me that said, I have to pursue this. And again, I thought, my wife still thinks I'm crazy with all of this. But at the time, you know, I decided to take this massive leap of faith. I put all of my life savings into the organization in the early days. So we were not VC funded at the time when we got started. And for those early days, it was all a combo of revenue and both life savings and credit cards. So, you know, I expected the market to develop a little bit faster, frankly, than it did. I thought when Google Glass came out, we were like in the throes of the future. Turns out it was a little bit longer than anticipated, but thankfully, you know, everything started to fall into place, and we raised our seed round last year. We just closed our Series A about a month ago. So we now have the resources that we need. But my gosh, in those early days when we were flying around the world, my co-founder and I, and we were trying to evangelize this technology, you know, in those early days, and even just explain that AR does not mean accounts receivable. Not kidding. We've actually gotten that more times than I can count. You know, evangelizing this industry was hard. And there were a lot of times where I was like, man, I'm just going to go back to consulting. I'm just going to go do my old thing. But we just kept seeing the enthusiasm from scientists and engineers around the planet saying that, guys, we need this. And so it took longer than anticipated, but we're just starting to see the inflection point that we've been waiting for all these years. And we hope that this is just the beginning of the next wave of augmented reality. And so, you know, my wife still says that our life savings are on paper, but it's fine. Eventually it'll work itself out.
Do they still let you code?
What's that?
Do they still let you code, or are you done coding?
Yeah, well, I was still in the office. We were here as a team till 2 o'clock in the morning last night because we have a big presentation coming up. But yeah, I still get involved on a day-to-day because it's just, there's nothing like putting fingers to keyboard and building something with your two hands. I don't do it as much anymore, but I still get to build some of the cool features that I want to build. That's the beauty of being the boss now. I get to say I get to build that.
Angelo, congratulations on creating something and particularly being persistent, sticking it out. It was great having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
The coffee break is coming to a close. Thank you again, Angelo. And please join me again next Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, for another coffee with Mr. Connected and Mr. IoT. And by the way, if you missed any part of today's conversation, you can come to my YouTube channel and see a repeat of today's show or any past shows. And with that, happy Friday, everyone.